Well, hello, folks. Good afternoon. Welcome to SOPA's Media Insiders Webinar. Can you hear me? Am I clear? I think, let me do that. I think that's how about 90% of our meetings have started in the last 13 months, if I'm not mistaken. And I'd like to welcome everyone to the first Media Insiders event that we've had, that SOPA has had in quite some time. We're very proud to be able to bring you four fantastic professionals from around Asia to talk about what publishers can teach advertisers in the 2020s and vice versa. If any of you haven't engaged with SOPA in some time, I think you'll be happy to know we, as an organization, we've been powering through the COVID pandemic and are looking forward to a very strong 2020s. As many of you know, SOPA was founded in 1982, and we've become the premier organization for publishers in Asia to represent their corporate as well as journalistic interests. And we run the very well-known SOPA Awards, the Media Insiders series, and a variety of other programs that we work with publishers on to really bolster the industry throughout the Indo-Pacific. My name is Barrett Bingley. I'm the North Asia Sales Director for the Economist Group, Board Director with SOPA, sit on the Government Relations Committee and the Finance Committee. For those of you who are just learning about SOPA, the Government Relations Committee is a new committee. It's one of the initiatives that we have going forward to help publishers speak to governments in the region, as publishers have encountered a variety of challenges in the last couple of years. If any of you are not members, or rather your companies are not members and you're watching this, please do contact us, get involved, either with myself or Christine Wong, who's on, our MD. And down in Singapore, some of you may know Byron Perry, who's our new chair, and he's the CEO of Coconuts. I mean, there's lots of us to reach out to. We'd love to have new members join us. So please do that. That's my commercial for this webinar. Now I'd like to set things up here. We're going to have 4 speakers. We're going to structure this session really addressing 4 different questions throughout the 90 minutes. And we'll be taking questions from the audience. Please post your questions into the Q&A box. And we'll be getting to them as we go through each of those 4 sections, not waiting till the end, but taking them throughout the session. So please, if you have questions now, start posting away, and we'll get to as many as we can in the time allotted. I think what we'll do first is allow each of the panelists to introduce themselves and their company, so everyone can understand the viewpoint that they're coming from. And then we're going to go to some opening statements on the first question around how are publishers and brands working together in the 2020s. So perhaps I could turn first for intros to Julia.
Hi, everyone, and thanks, Barrett. As Barrett mentioned, my name is Julia Clyne. I head up media sales for Dow Jones, and I'm also head of our in-house creative consultancy, which is called the Trust for Asia. For many of you, when you think about Dow Jones, some of you might think of the stock market index, and you'd be right in thinking so. Our co-founder for Dow Jones created the stock market index over 30 years ago, but we've since sold it to the S&P. So today, Dow Jones is a professional information, media, and technology company, and it's probably best known for publishing the Wall Street Journal. And in Asia, we've been here operating for over 40 years. My team, we help our brand partners and agencies to solve business challenges through marketing solutions, such as advertising products, creative services, and offering insights based upon our data. Thanks, Barrett.
Thank you. And Juhi?
Hi, guys. I'm Juhi. I head up the in-house brand studio at Coconuts. I kind of sit between both the worlds because I spent over a decade in advertising, both in London and in Singapore at agencies like Ogilvy and Gray, ran some really iconic businesses like Heinz in the UK and Sentosa here. And then chatted with Byron and was super excited by what he was doing at Coconuts. I think he started it 10 years ago with this kind of sole mission to find these really weird and wonderful stories around the region. And yeah, brought me on board to help grow the branded studio and really think about how we can bring that edge, that storytelling, that authenticity to brands. And that's what I have been doing.
Thanks, Juhi. Welcome. And turning to Gaurav.
Hi, I'm Gaurav Lalwani, based in Singapore. Like Juhi, I've spent a lot of years in advertising across Asia. I'm from Wunderman Thompson. For those of you who don't know Wunderman Thompson, we partner brands for growth. We see ourselves as a consultancy company, a technology agency, as well as a creative agency. We really specialize in building brand solutions, brand purposes, customer experiences, and aggregating data for intelligence. Our focus is really to help brands accelerate their growth. My role in Asia is to help work with key clients, including FMCG companies, auto companies, tech companies, and government companies, to be able to really grow and scale across the region. So really looking forward to this chat.
Thank you for being here, Gaurav. And can I turn finally to Sumati?
Thank you, Barrett. I'm Sumati. I work with Reckitt Benckiser, one of the largest FMCG companies. We are in close to 200 countries with about 40,000 employees. Our brands fall typically into 3 categories, which is nutrition, health, and hygiene. For those of you not familiar with our portfolio, we are the makers of Dettol, Lysol, Durex, Clearasil, Veet, Finish, and the Enfamil infant formula brand. And I sit within the global marketing team called ERB, which is the digital arm of Reckitt and supports all the business units globally. I work specifically in the content CX team and with a focus on ASEAN, but as well as all the other countries in our portfolio. So that's me.
Thank you. And I see you also spent some time at Tickled Media, owners of the Asian parent. So you, like Juhi, have sort of crossed the divide as well.
I have. Indeed, I have.
Which is great. I mean, what a fantastic plethora of experience that we have. The last year and a half has been a time of incredible challenge for publishers, for advertisers, for marketing professionals, for agencies, with everything from staff challenges and in terms of what does work physically or virtually look like, through to distribution challenges for print publishers, to extraordinary digital transformation for everyone, I think. And you see different quotes that people think, COVID-19 has accelerated digital transformation anywhere between 5 and 10 years within the space of 12 months. And everyone's been coping with change. We all hope that vaccine programs will see life begin to return to normal. But what will that new normal look like? That's partly what we're here to explore today. None of us, I think, are too clear how fast that new normal might arrive. But we're also, I don't, especially in Asia, I don't think anyone's waiting for that. And we are instead rolling out our best new ideas and our best new collaborations in 2021. But underneath that kind of umbrella statement, I think there's a lot of interesting detail to dig into. So that's what we'd like to do at the beginning of this session here. And let's explore the question of how are publishers working with brands and agencies on effective marketing campaigns in 2021. And Julie, perhaps you could lead us off on that discussion.
Absolutely. Thanks, Barrett. So when we think about the interactions between publishers, agencies, and brands and how that's changed over COVID-19 or during COVID-19, there's really been 3 key areas of focus for us in terms of how we're serving our brand and agency partners. And one of them really does relate to what you've just mentioned, Barrett, about digital transformation, but more specifically data transformation. What we've really been thinking about is how we can serve our agency and brand partners through data solutions. The reason for that is because during COVID, previously held assumptions that we all had about how consumers were interacting with products and media, as well as how audiences were consuming content. All of these assumptions almost went away overnight, and they became redundant very quickly. And so what we all had to do was look at data in real time to pivot strategies very, very quickly. And what we've felt at the Wall Street Journal, Barron's Group, is that this prioritization of data isn't new. It's just an acceleration of product roadmaps that a lot of us already have been working on to improve our data infrastructure. Many of us have felt quite aware of the impending cookieless future. So we've been thinking about data transformation for a long time, but COVID-19 has certainly accelerated that. For us at the Wall Street Journal Barron's Group, we really think about providing data solutions in two ways. One, we want to harness the first-party data that we've been collecting on our audience since 1996 when we put up our paywall. We've had a one-to-one relationship with our readers since then. And so what we can do is use that first-party data to build ad products for brands who need it to be able to better contextualize or to find better contextual environments for their messaging, or they need data products to help them to promote their messaging in brand suitable environments, and first party data can certainly do that. And the other area of focus for us as a publisher has been to provide more of a service layer to our relationships with agencies and brands by offering insights and recommendations for strategies. The second area of focus for us, when we really think about the interaction between these sort of three players within the media industry, really relates to the transformation, the complete transformation of events. Overnight, events turn from in-person, as we all know, into a brand new digital platform. And unlike the data transformation I just mentioned, virtual events perhaps wasn't as much on people's roadmaps, but it certainly now is. And what I've found is really interesting when we think about virtual events is that our brand partners are really perceiving this as a brand new online platform. And in doing that, they put the same expectations on the performance of that platform as they might for other online campaign components that they could be running. What we've seen is advertisers really paying attention to clicks and views of their sponsor hubs. They're looking at really nuanced interactions between their executives and other event attendees. And all of this is to measure whether or not events actually do give them a good return on investment. And that's really how they are already thinking about their branded content and digital display advertising. So I think that there's a real merging of virtual events into that online space. For us at the Wall Street Journal Barron's Group, we've held over 100 virtual events since we pivoted to this platform in March of last year, and we really haven't looked back. And the reason for that is that we've seen a lot of maybe unexpected benefits for our advertising partners. I think number one has been scale. We've just been delighted at the ability for our advertisers to get their messages to lots more people than they otherwise would be able to. I think that one of the other benefits has been the breadth of audiences that we've been able to give them access to. Perhaps previously CEOs who are traveling the world and in sort of maybe sort of having lots of in-person meetings and not in front of their computer, we've now been able to gain access to these previously very hard to reach people. And the third benefit that we've seen for advertisers, which I'm really interested and passionate about, is that the nature of virtual events means that some of the extraneous details of events, such as hospitality and beautiful hotel locations, for example, all of that's been stripped away, and what we have is the content. And I think that that's a benefit to advertisers, publishers, and agencies who want to engage people through content. The third area of interest for us when we think about the interaction between publishers, brands, and agencies really relates to something that's quite, I think, unique to the Wall Street Journal Barron's Group. And this is where we're helping our advertising partners to become and to gain access to niche communities that the Wall Street Journal Barron's Group has formed over decades. I think we can all relate to the concept of a community. We, without knowing it, are a part of many different communities, a Hong Kong community, a media community, the community of our families. At the Wall Street Journal Barron's Group, we're really focused on identifying and understanding specific needs of different communities. And we can think about that through the lens of, for example, someone's role. So at the Wall Street Journal, we think about what the needs of CEOs are versus the needs of CMOs. And we can also think of it through the lens of different industries. So at the Wall Street Journal Barron's Group, we think a lot about the wealth and asset management industry and the needs in terms of content for that community. So certainly one of the ways that we serve those communities are through creating and curating very specific content for them. But what we've found is that's really a one-way relationship, and what our members of these communities really want, as well as that content that's tailored for them, is the ability to learn from and interact with their peers. So we help them with that need by thinking about how to convene different communities through on-the-record live journalism moments. These are moments that can potentially break news and that our reporters attend to write articles on the back of, but we also convene them through members-only intimate exchanges, and these are really important to them. We've found that communities have been, I think, even more valuable through COVID because our readers have relied on trusted journalism more during this time to make critical decisions, and they need to talk to their peers more to be able to access advice and information. But just as important these communities are to advertisers. And the reason for that is that I think advertisers who maybe are sponsoring events on a once-off basis realize that they don't have maybe a long-term ability to engage with a specific community if they're just coming in and out through an event sponsorship. Through sponsoring a community, advertisers can actually play a really important role in adding value to that conversation over a long period of time. And the Wall Street Journal here in Asia is really focused on specifically expanding on the benefits that we offer our CEO Council community, and we're soft launching a Women in Leadership network in April and sort of officially launching it in September, and that's also a focus for Asia. Back to you, Barrett.
Thank you, Julia. That's exciting news about the Women in Leadership community that you're launching. Thank you for the perspective and for structuring your comments in a very clear way to follow, which you would expect for somebody coming from the business media, the B2B world. And I'd like to get a different perspective from the B2C world and a brand that has a very different type of DNA, coconuts. And so, Juhi, can I turn to you to get your perspective on the same question? Juhi, you're on mute.
Yeah, sorry, that was going to happen at some point. Get it out of the way. I think actually it's exactly what you said. You know, even though we're all publishers, and you know, Julia works for a publisher, I work for a publisher, it really comes down so much to the DNA of the publication. And I think what I have learned, and what I think that, you know, the world of publishing can really help. I don't like using the word teach because that's incredibly patronizing, but I think what the world of publishing can bring to the world of advertising is really bringing it back to the basics. I think what the last year and a half has taught us is that the basics are so important. The home you live in, the company you keep, especially when you have to choose your top 5 people to hang out with and nobody else, your health, the basics have become a very, very important focus. And so it really got me thinking about what are the basic aspects that we do in publishing that I think are relevant to brands. The first, and this might be obvious, but is incredibly powerful, is storytelling and telling stories that matter. Coconuts was completely founded in really digging up those stories that no one has found and telling them in a way that is truly engaging. We know that brands we know that people more than ever before are choosing brands that have a purpose. And the most powerful way of talking about your purpose is through storytelling. And I think one of the things that often gets misinterpreted is that, oh, well, storytelling is great, but does it drive results? You know, it's something that we keep coming back to. In publishing, it is what we have built our entire business on, is finding a story and telling it well. And I think stories are really where brands are built. It is where people find a bit of themselves. It's where they see part of their life. It's where they resonate with you. And it is where you kind of capture their heart and a place in their world, not just a moment kind of in their wallet. So I think the power of storytelling is what is incredibly crucial to publishers. And it's what I think we need to come back to when we think about brands and what they're doing. The second is that as publishers, we don't focus on the channel. We're not chasing a media channel. We're chasing a story. And I think that we know today that consumers have way too many channels to choose from and arguably have less attention and less focus than ever before. So I think what we do in publishing is find the story and use the media as a way to enhance the story or make sure it gets out there. And I think very much chasing the story, finding the story, digging in to find that untold story and not chasing the channel. I think that is something that is a basic that I think might be something we need to come back to a little bit more. The third point, and is actually, I was told this on kind of day one of my advertising career. I started my career at AMV BBDO in London, and it was considered the school and mecca of advertising. And the grad scheme on day one, 9:30 in the morning, the first thing the MD said to us, he said, so great, you've got this exciting career ahead of you, but I want to tell you something. He said, when you create a piece of advertising, and back then it was really about TV commercials being the biggest thing. He said, when you create a piece of advertising, you're going to be in someone's living room. That is an incredibly personal space that you're going to be in. You better make sure that you are respecting that privilege, that you tell them what you want to sell, but you also tell them why it's relevant. Do it in a way that's effective, entertaining, engaging, but do it respectfully. And I think that today, the access that brands and publishers that we all have to our consumers is unprecedented. I mean, we have access to their most private moments, most private conversations. I mean, it's a whole other topic. But I think one of the questions that I think is, maybe I don't have an answer to, but I'd like to put out there is, is that respect more lacking than ever? So I think really bringing it back to that respect for the story and that respect for the person at the other end of it who's consuming it. Someone said this to me a while ago, and it really stuck with me, and about why would a brand choose to work with us as the publisher, and especially a publisher like Coconuts, where really our specialty is all about those crazy, awesome stories. And it's because advertising is not in our DNA. Telling stories that matters is, and I'm not saying we get it right, by the way. I mean, publishers cause their own amount of chaos around the world. But what we are trying to do as publishers every day is tell every aspect of the story, the who, the what, the when, the why. And we're trying to make sure that we package it up in a way that is truly engaging, that pulls people in. So for example, at Coconuts, we have our publications, so BK, Soy Milk, Coconuts. We are producing shows that run on Netflix. These are all platforms that are pulling people in. That consumer centricity that goes into creating that content, it's bringing that. I mean, it's what brands are looking to do. But I think because we have brands of our own that we have built and we have pulled people in with content, it's bringing that consumer-centric content and that full picture point of view. Like I keep saying, it's the picture, not just the pixel. And bringing that to brands. That's what I think we can do. So really, in conclusion, I think I'm bringing it way back to a very simple point, which is bringing it back to storytelling. And I think that is what publishers do incredibly well. And it's the investigative, entertaining aspect of it that I think is particularly relevant. But the other thing I also did get thinking about actually was, what can publishers learn from advertising? And having spent over a decade in the industry, there is a lot that advertising gets absolutely spot on. And one of the things is that the world today is so fraught. There are so many issues from, social, economic, political, I mean, it's environmental, it's endless. And what advertising has done since the existence of it really is create behavior change, preference, purchasing. So I think what will be really interesting is to see how what publishers can learn from advertising agencies and brands on how you create behavior change, because publishers have the stories, but I think we could use some more help in driving the change that the world needs right now. And I think affecting change has always been the remit of agencies and brands. So yeah, I think there is a lot to learn from both sides. And that's, yeah, back to you, Barrett.
Thank you, Juhi. Stories, purpose, driving change. I mean, these are challenging discussions. Thank you for raising the topics. Your point about it is the audience's attention span shorter? Is it harder to capture? I think is an interesting one. When I hear of friends and people around the world binge watching Netflix or HBO Max for 8 hours to catch up on a series of shows, I think, well, people's attention can't be that divided. Maybe it's just that we need to be earning that attention. Certainly, one of the Economist's newer divisions, the Economist Films, we found that when we deliver a deeply reported documentary, 20-23 minutes, people will stay on and watch the entire thing. And I know Coconuts is experimenting and working in that space right now as well. So it's certainly that concept of respecting the viewer and giving them a deeply reported story. And that's the heart of things. I think that resonates with a lot of people. And I want to turn to Gaurav. And Wunderman Thompson is a storied creative agency. I suspect a lot of what Juhi is saying resonates well with you. And you act as a bridge really between publishers and marketers, advertisers. So how are you seeing things roll out in 2021? What's new in your world? What's working?
Thanks, Barrett. So I look at Juhi's world and Juhi's world and Julia's world, and I see that it's so exciting, filled with stories and content. I think the change that we've seen in the last 2 years is, I think, more change than we've seen in the last 2 decades. And I think one of the key reasons why is because we really have seen a seismic shift in the landscape of how the customer buys, how they search, how they go to market, and also how they're influenced. And Wunderman Thompson has been spending some time really focusing on customer experience. So I feel everything we do starts with understanding and getting the customer experience right. And I think that's a very big shift from where agencies used to be even about 2 or 3 years ago, where the focus was either the strategy or the idea or the brand. And I think what we see ourselves is as architects. We really look at building the architecture around the customer experience, the technology, the brand, what it stands for, what the foundations are. And I think the biggest shift that we've seen is that if nothing else, the entire experience has become a lot more complex. There's been massive shift in the choices that the customer has in terms of where to buy from. They're constantly shopping for deals. But as we focus on the changes, I think one of the things that we also look for is let's focus on what hasn't changed. And I think there are 3 things that haven't changed at all, right? So customers are still looking for brands that they trust. So trust plays a very significant role. And a brand plays a very big role in really driving that trust. And as we need to really drive trust, we need to stay relevant. And the best way to stay relevant is through purpose. I think Juhi spoke about this, and really building the foundation for purpose is to stand for something truly meaningful. We've been spending a lot of time with Gen Z to really understand what is it that they're seeking from brands, and how do we really help brands to leap forward from what they were to what they need to become, but also staying true to their DNA. The other piece that we really feel, and we talk about this less, is really the value that we are driving. Because today customers have choice. They obviously are looking at managing their budgets. And how do we ensure that we are driving value? And value is not just about price. It's really about driving the right value equation. So it's things like performance. It's things like long-term value. Luxury is also talking about value. So those are the 3 things I feel we haven't seen a change in, right? Trust, purpose, and value continue to stay the same. So as we see this shift, one of the big changes we are seeing is agencies that have always been great at creating inspirational content, right? They've been good at driving the purpose, building the great content around it. But there are so many opportunities in the whole ecosystem of the customer experience. When customers are looking for product information, they're looking to be inspired in life. They're looking for influencers like them. They're looking to share their experiences. And I feel as we unravel and unveil how Gen Z is experiencing brands and content, Gen Z is extremely different, as we all know, from Gen Y. But the key points that make them different is Gen Z truly believes in authenticity. That's number one. And in fact, a lot of the content they see from Gen Y doesn't relate or resonate to them because they feel a lot of it is pretentious or paid for or sponsored. Gen Z lives very differently. The second big thing that we've seen with Gen Z is that Gen Zs want brands to start working together to really make an impact and make a difference. So it's not that Gen Zs want brands to make a difference by themselves. They want brands and companies to come together to really create real shift and change. And the third big difference we've seen with Gen Z is that they're extremely focused on consuming content. They love content, but they might not be as good at creating their own content. They're a lot more camera shy. They don't always want to share as much as Gen Y would. So one of the things that we feel as opportunities is that Gen Z and the entire audience wants to start seeing more content. And I think as we look at the partnership with publishers, I think there is a huge room to play in creating more purposeful content. I think Juhi spoke about this in terms of making more stories that are linked to the brand purpose, enabling consumers to discover and explore products in a lot more authentic way, really about, potentially unboxing, identifying what works, what doesn't work, being truly authentic. And I think last but not the least, there is a lot of commerce-related content that needs to be created. And I think that's where there's a huge gap. And commerce-related content is just not pack shots, but it's really authentic product reviews. It's people want to know what doesn't work as much as they want to know what works for them to truly believe in buying a product. And that could work across auto, it works across healthcare, it works across CPG. So we are seeing that there is more and more need for really true, authentic, meaningful content as the customer journey becomes a lot more sophisticated and complex. And agencies and brands by themselves are not going to be able to create all that content. So there is a big room to play for publishers to come and fill in that gap.
Hey, Gaurav. I mean, that's a nice positive note to end on. That there is a big gap for publishers to play in, and it's in the 2020s there will be room for us all to be telling a lot of stories and creating content and working towards helping Gen Z to trust us, believe in purpose, and see the value. So if I could finish this section off by turning to Sumati, to hear from you, what's been the exciting developments for you in the 2020 and going into 2021, and what's working with publishers? And then in the next section, we'll get into what are you expecting, what are you hoping to see from them? But maybe give us a sort of snapshot right now of things. And I'll just remind the audience, we're going to take one or two questions on this section. So if you haven't yet, get them into the Q&A box. Thank you. So Sumati, over to you.
Thank you, Barrett. Again, I'm sitting here and listening to Juhi, Julia, and Gaurav and saying, I echo a little bit of everything that they're saying. We at RB have actually been working with publishers for a while now. But what the last year has done for us has really brought that home. The fact that that relationship is here to stay, and if anything, it's going to get further strengthened. And I think the space in which this becomes most prominent is the always-on engagement that we need to drive with the consumers. So obviously our big brand stories around trust, purpose, and value, Gaurav, as you said very, very well, are still going to be built with our big agency partners because, that's where a lot of the thinking and strategy gets set. What happened in the last year specifically was that how do we keep this going constantly now, since we won't have campaigns coming in constantly, and the shopping is now all happening digitally. Our focus on, as a business, our focus on e-commerce, digital sales went up by notches. As a result, we needed to create a lot of content, which kind of kept our consumers took our consumers through the entire funnel, right? So it was, how do we do that entire end-to-end experience online, digitally, in one space? So from my point of view, there are 3 or 4 big things that happened, and I think will become a way of working and understanding as we move forward. The first is, how do we work with publishers very specifically in creating always on consumer experiences and consumer engagement? The second, I think, is because we're doing that, the sheer volume of content that we need to create has also gone up. It's not one KV, it's not one story, it's multiple assets being created in real time, not just e-commerce as we've seen, but actually even based on, and the more ownership we get of our data, the more we understand our audiences, it's actually how do we constantly optimize their engagement and their experience on our own platforms. So I think that's a big thing that's happened for us. And then the third thing is actually touching on something that you said, Gaurav. It's like benchmarking. When even I as a consumer, or our consumers, are not saying, hey, is this ad being created by an agency, or is this a publisher content, and what was the brand thinking? They're consuming everything with the same, their consumption view is the same. They are not looking at who the producer behind it is. They don't have the time to understand or think about or take a pause. So the traditional benchmarking that we've had, whether it's, oh, what was my previous campaign benchmark, or what's the industry benchmark, or what's the sector benchmark, it's actually the benchmarks now for us have shifted, and it's like, what's the best? It could be a publisher benchmark, it could be a TV series. It's actually, what is the consumer consuming, and that just becomes your benchmark. It's and I think that's something that is it's an aspiration that we have, is how do we then compete in that space and deliver the best consumer experience, rather than just saying no, I'm only going to look at my previous campaign benchmark, or I'm going to just look within my own industry, right? So it's kind of shifting that a little bit. So those are some of the big shifts that we have had internally. And as I said, they're just getting more and more cemented as we move forward. And I think what the ideals, it's like a dream for me personally, is that if I get amazing creativity with the data discipline underlining it, right? So for us, like, that is something that we're seeking for in any partner that we work with. And I know Julia's touched on that in terms of talking about the data and the ability to create communities on the back of it, and then you nurture them long term and create new brands or new products on the back of it. And Juhi's talked about the creativity angle, the storytelling, which again is the bread and butter of any publisher. So at the end of the day, it's how do we harness both of those together to deliver on our specific KPIs and consumer experiences. And I have a lot more to say, but I will wait.
Thank you, Sumati. I think I like that phrase, and I think it's going to catch on through 2021, the importance of data discipline. I can see that becoming a popular boardroom bingo phrase. So there was a question, before I get to any audience questions, there's a question I wanted to ask. I think I'll start with Gaurav, but anyone can jump in on this. Gaurav, you brought up the discussion around businesses, corporations standing for something meaningful, right? And I'm not surprised to hear you as an agency leader kind of putting that out there. But it's also not a new concept. Really, we've seen this growing since the 1990s as a reaction against the sort of greed is good of the 1980s, at least in the West, and then it accelerated through the financial crisis. And there's been varying levels of acceptance or skepticism in the boardroom around these concepts. And so I guess my question to you as an agency leader is, when you're presenting these concepts and asking corporations to stand for something meaningful, what's the trigger for you where you see that they actually have committed to this, right? Is it a budget allocation? Is it some sort of a hiring decision, a reorganization where they've clearly committed to standing for something beyond, say, shareholder capitalism and delivering a good dividend, right? I think that's what you mean, standing for something more meaningful than the Chicago school, right? So what is it that shows you that a corporation has that true aspiration, is willing to sort of walk the talk?
I feel, I think there's a big shift in the last maybe 3 years or 5 years where corporations are a lot more intentional about their intent to do something good, right? So I think that's driven by the consumer, right? And I think in the past, the challenge was that they wanted to do a good initiative, and that would be, coming out of their profitability, where they would have to spend more for that initiative. And it was always at the cost of profit, or it was the cost of something else. But I feel now it's almost a level playing field, where if you don't stand for something bigger, and you don't have a really strong intention to do good, you're going to get called out, right? And there are many lists that are being created that are now shared publicly about who's actually really helped during the recession, for one, right? And I think there has been a lot of those conversations that have been publicly disclosed. But I feel the key thing, and I talk about some of our clients. I think Unilever has been talking about purpose for many decades now, and I think the torture test of someone who's truly believes in their purpose is when they don't just stop at communication, but they go beyond that. So I'll give you the example of Dove Real Beauty, which I think is a fantastic, very inspirational brand purpose, right? But I think they went beyond that, and beyond just communication, when they started recycling their packs. And one of the big things that the leadership at Unilever said when they launched the recycled packs is that, as we're changing the standard of beauty, we are also changing the standard of packaging. And we know that when you recycle packaging, they're not going to be pure white, beautiful looking packs on the shelf. They might have some spots, they might be gray. So is gray the new white on packaging? Do we want to call those black spots on packaging the new beauty spots on packaging? So I think when a brand is able to communicate their intent so holistically and so completely, is when I truly believe that there is a intent to do it beyond communication. I think the torture test, and I think the consumers will call out bullshit much faster than anyone else, is the moment you stop at communication is when you'll get called out, right? There needs to be the entire value chain, supply chain, experience, everything around it that is able to really speak about the intention that the brand has.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, that's a good way to encapsulate it. Can't be stopping at communication. And any others who wanted to jump in on that question before we move to the next section? Okay, then. Oh, sorry, Juhi, was it?
Oh, no, I was just going to say that the court of public opinion is fiercer than ever. And I think there is an expectation that if you don't stand for something, you stand for nothing. And I think that but I think the layer that is becoming harder and harder for brands, and I'm saying this purely as a consumer, is finding that purpose that fits you and your company. So not purpose for the sake of purpose. And I think that, so initially it was all about consumers wanting to choose brands that have a purpose. Now it is, are you choosing a brand that has a purpose that is authentic and true to who you are? And I think to see how brands pivot. So Unilever is a perfect example of how they've always kept it true to their own business. But people are becoming more and more skeptical now of brands that are finding a purpose for the sake of purpose that is not in any way aligned. And I think that skepticism is something that will be interesting to see how that forms brand opinion.
All right. Thank you. And shall we now move on to the next section, where we're going to have our agency and marketing leaders talk to us about what are brands and agencies expecting from publishers. And this could also be, where do you think that they're falling down and need to improve, as well as what are the things that you think have been, stand out and really positive in the last little bit. But perhaps I could start with Gaurav and then go to Sumati on this as our lead discussants.
Yeah, I can start. I mean, I think I mean, without being too critical, I think firstly, the agencies and brands need to get much better and open to working with publishers. I think it's a progressive move forward. It's the right thing to do. And I don't think there's another way around it, right? But I do feel that brands and agencies have a level of sophistication that helps to govern their brand and their world. And the moment they bring in publishers, they need to have an understanding that the publisher is able to appreciate that world, right? Because that world is quite sophisticated. I mean, for instance, real beauty, right? You could potentially misunderstand that space and go in a completely different space, which is off-brand. So I feel that the biggest fear that brands and agencies have is when publishers go too far out and could be damaging to the brand if they don't really understand the sophisticated space and purpose. That is one piece, right? Which I think a lot of the publishers that we talk to have that level of sophistication, but there is still a risk. The second piece is, I feel that if publishers want to truly work with brands, they need to understand what the problems are that the brands face, right? As you talk about a story, how does that story connect to the problem of a brand or a business, right? So if, say, there is negative reviews on a specific product, you know, what angle will the publisher take, knowing fully well where those negative reviews have come from? And how do we find a way to recognize that completely, but then kind of spin that into a positive potentially? So I feel that there are two key spaces. One is the really truly understanding the purpose, and the second is understanding the business challenges. And I would say really spending time to appreciate and understand those.
Okay. More understanding across purpose and brand's challenges. I got it. Sumati, how does that jive with what you're doing on a day-to-day basis and what you're expecting from publishers?
I actually completely agree with what Gaurav has put out there. But I'll come to that. But in my response, I actually want to split it into two kinds of engagement that we have with publishers. One is when because as we're moving forward as brands, we are focusing a lot more on our own platforms, right? Our own website, our own social channels, our own different platforms. So when we engage with publishers to create content for our own channels, right, as a content marketing agency, and they're helping us create, populate our own websites and bringing their storytelling talents for our platforms. My question to the publishers is, can you help us understand how we can, since we many times would be looking at the same audience and we might have the same themes that we want to develop, how would we prevent competing for the same audiences, especially when it comes to a space of SEO and attention, etc. So it's a challenge in front of some of the publishers every now and then, but I haven't yet received a clear answer on how do we work forward with that. So that's one question I do have for publishers as we move forward. The second comes in terms of, again, what Gaurav said. It is actually coming to me and saying, what's your business challenge? What's your brand challenge? What's happening at this point? Because traditionally publishers have worked with us in a space where it's campaign-based, right? You have a campaign KPI and you deliver against that campaign, metrics, whatever they may be. But the challenge in saying, what's the business struggling with? Or what is it that you want to achieve? And coming in with a strategy to address that rather than just products. At the moment, I don't think the publishers are there yet. So I think that's a space for them to, again, build in. And I know Julia alluded to that earlier, is that service layer that needs to come in, which is not just in terms of account management, but in terms of actually giving us solutions that work beyond product, strategic solutions. I think that's another aspect to look at. And the third, again, we've touched at different points, is data discipline, which is how much of the data do you feed back to us, how often, and what are the insights and analysis that you draw from that. And then there was a fourth, and I was thinking about this, is as brands, we are now looking at, a lot of the times we're having conversation with different ad tech partners. And we want to experiment and we want to try them out and see, how they work. And for publishers to open up their platforms to integrations, etc. Sometimes it's not always an easy task, but also we find that sometimes we are taking solutions as a brand to them, saying, hey, we would like to try out this particular ad tech partner and see how does that work. And I think, again, that's a space I know we've not really touched on in this conversation, but I do think that moving forward, that's going to become an increasingly important part of the conversation. So yeah, those are my 4 suggestions for how we can work better.
Thank you. I mean, those are more than suggestions. I think those are challenges to the whole publishing industry. I mean, you touched some very live wires there with the ad tech point, I think, and the data discipline in particular. And actually, we have a question from the SOPA chairman, Byron, that I think actually works very nicely in this section. So I'm going to ask it, and anyone can respond. And I think your responses will be quite telling and likely different. So Byron asks, there's a large debate ongoing currently about the effectiveness of performance marketing. Airbnb, for example, recently announced that they would slash their performance marketing budget because they found it ineffective and focus on brand. What are the panelists' opinions on this subject? So performance marketing, useful or not, going to die in the 2020s in favor of brand, or is that a crazy notion? Who would like to jump in on this?
I can say that it's not going to disappear anytime soon for us, for sure. I think it's evolving, and it's evolving at a very, at an exponential pace. And I think there is a space, especially if your Airbnb's products are not listed anywhere outside of Airbnb. So I think that our products are listed and sold on multiple platforms, offline, online, etc. So there is space, there is certainly a need for our kind of business to have performance marketing in there. In the mix. So I wouldn't liken Airbnb to us. So it's difficult for me to sort of say, are they right or are they wrong? But I'm pretty sure in our business, it's not going away right now.
Yeah, I have to wonder if there's not something that says that maybe you don't need to focus as much on performance marketing once you become a verb. I'm going to do that. I'm going to Airbnb this. And then you can, although I think in Hong Kong, at least, I'm going to dettle that desk is actually, that has become a verb as far as I see. Anyone else who'd like to jump in on that discussion?
I would just say that I agree. There's been a lot of discussion about brand versus performance marketing. And I think that when talking to clients who are really focused on programmatic, for example, and having every dollar that they put out there in terms of digital marketing to work for them, they don't actually differentiate as much between the two. They feel that their brand campaigns have to work and perform just as much as, say, their lead gen campaigns, but just in a different way. And they're looking for different measures of performance, which equals success. So I think that from our perspective, those discussions are helpful when we're speaking with clients to ascertain, is this a brand campaign or a lead generation campaign versus is it a performance campaign? Because I think that those distinctions are actually important.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And I was just going to say exactly that. One of the things that we've been doing at Coconuts is really looking at our product mix to very specifically segment products explicitly for purposes. It sounds super obvious, but it's amazing how many times we've been asked for super specific metrics on a piece of branded content, and I was like, well, that's not how, it's top of funnel. It's not meant to drive conversion. So re-looking at our products to answer the need for every different aspect. So that's the first point, is really looking at the product mix as publishers. And the second point, which might be a little more contentious though, is credibility. And I have a personal preference, which is not the point, but performance marketing in consumers' eyes is starting to have a certain question mark around credibility. There is a joke around, oh, I got an Instagram ad for this, it is going to be a scam. I'm just giving you an example. That's a very different point, but I think there is a credibility point around performance versus brand. And I think understanding how you address credibility and how you address your your budgets, your objective, and your creative and your data to fit the purpose of each channel. You know, it was something we've been trying to bring it back to internally as well.
So you're leading us into the social media discussion.
Oh, completely by accident.
Thank you. All right, so we shift gears a little bit and move over to our third section of the webinar around where does advertising and branded content fit into the overall revenue mix for media for publishers, right? There's a variety of media revenue streams. We've certainly seen a lot of emphasis around memberships as well as subscriptions driving really profit for companies, because that's a very scalable type of business. Julia, you spoke about really the whole growth of the events side of things. I think most publishers have felt that bump to some degree. What about advertising, which has been challenged certainly by the duopoly of Google and Facebook and branded content? So maybe if I could turn first to Juhi and then to Julia as our discussants for this third section, please.
Sure. So for us, it very much branded content and advertising revenue remains incredibly key to the business. I think it's two things. It's obviously the revenue aspect, but I think more importantly is what it brings to us as publishers and building our own brand. So, you know, how do we go and work with brands that align with our values? Because as publishers, we are a brand of our own. We are really able to go out and find brand partners to tell those really interesting stories that builds both brands and down the line, therefore revenue. So that's the first, I think that's really a big push we are making. And that's the role that Grove plays within Coconuts as a company. The second really is we're finding that Grove is really where we are able to try different formats and push different kinds of products. So for example, Coconuts has an entire arm called Coconuts TV, which is going massively into originals and broadcast shows and entertainment. And what we're able to suddenly do is bring that credibility and that expertise to a brand. And suddenly you're having a very different conversation with agencies and brands about the level of spend, because you're not talking about a TVC or a piece of branded content. You're potentially talking about a TV show that is brand funded. So the potential, so while we don't focus as much on subscription, it isn't very core to the model at the moment. What we do is focus on the potential for brand partnerships to grow the business beyond just what we know is advertising, but that takes us into the space around entertainment and broadcast. So that's really the role of Grove, is kind of innovation and transforming the business from within.
So what I take away from that is that HBO and the other networks should be afraid, very afraid.
Yeah. It's bringing that storytelling and all of that and just applying it to a whole new space for us.
Very good. Julia, how about you?
Just as you mentioned, Barrett, our subscription business, or how we call it at the Wall Street Journal, our membership business, is increasingly important and also an increasingly successful revenue stream for us. It's really driven from our mission to be a source of truth for decision makers. So what we want them to think about when they think about the Wall Street Journal is that this is content that I need as a critical component or source of information to do my job. So in that way, we want our content to be a necessity as opposed to a nice to have or a utility for our readers. So that membership part of our business is becoming increasingly important. We actually reached an important milestone for our business in Q4 where we reached 4 million members for Dow Jones, and 3 million of those are digital members. But our advertising business will always be an important revenue stream for the Wall Street Journal. And that's really because, as I mentioned before, advertisers play a really important part, or they add to the conversation within our communities, and they genuinely do sort of bring a different voice to our members within those. As you know, we are a print publication, and our print advertising revenue does decline slightly each year. So our digital investments and our digital performance for advertising really is important as we go forward. And we've been investing a lot in the digital products that we have. We also reached some interesting milestones last year. We grew our digital advertising business by 29% year on year in Q4. And now our digital advertising business actually makes up 58% of all of our advertising revenue. I think the key for us, though, as you mentioned, Barrett, is diversification, whether it be through branded content, events, or even data-led solutions. I think that for publishers having a healthy business model, that really does mean a diversity of revenue streams. So for us, we're looking at other ways to monetize the platforms that we have and to add value to communities through things like e-commerce, for example. So always looking at sort of what the next thing is that we can offer to our members that is unique to the Wall Street Journal.
Interesting point on the last one around e-commerce. I mean, should SEA in Singapore and Alibaba here be worried about Wall Street Journal eating their lunch?
They should be terrified.
Very good. I'd actually, we have a few minutes. Actually, Juhi and Julia were very succinct in your remarks, and thank you for that. And Sumati and Gaurav, hearing this sort of where the growth is and what publishers are looking for their revenue mix, surely the digital component's not particularly surprising to you. Does this jive with where you hope that publishers are going and the types of solutions that they're going to be offering to you, or are you concerned when you hear this? Gaurav, I think you unmuted first. If you.
Yeah, I see it as a natural progression for the publishers to go here. I have a couple of maybe just questions which I would like some clarity on. Maybe it's similar to what Sumati had said earlier, is just from the brands world. I think one of the key things that brands are looking to drive, we talk a lot about purpose, but I think essentially trust is what has been able, the brands that have been most trusted have grown most in the last 2 years. And a lot of the platforms that you guys have, right? So you call it coconuts, Wall Street, they command a high level of trust. And the question is, how do we find a way to leverage the credibility of your platform? And is it advertising? Is it native content? How do we find a way to merge the world of brand and editorial a bit closer? Obviously, keeping in line with your, editorial integrity. So that was one kind of question that was out there. Like, there's a lot of trust that you guys are able to generate, and how can brands leverage the trust that you generate as collaborate to create more content? The second thing is that, to me, it's more about, we live in an omni-channel world. And I know that many content or many publishers like to keep the content within their own worlds. How do we find a way that we're able to allow that content that we create to live across different platforms so that it creates more ROI for the investment that we put into the content?
I can answer on behalf of the Wall Street Journal. I think this is such an important question, Gaurav. The Wall Street Journal values trust with that relationship of trust that we have with our readers more than anything else. Without it, our whole business is a different business. The Wall Street Journal is actually the most trusted US news source, and we have been for many years. And the way that we do that is by, as you mentioned, strictly adhering to those ethical guidelines and standards that we've had within our business for 131 years. The research that we've done around trust shows that there is a halo effect that is given to brands just by being close to close to the Wall Street Journal brand or within our pages or within our website. So digital advertising, display advertising, print advertising, and branded content is all affected by the halo of trust that brands like Wall Street Journal and Coconuts imbue into advertiser brands when they're found within our ecosystem. I would say that, as you said, that integration or that coming to sort of together closer between sort of the editorial components and the brand voice, I think that, again, with the research that we've seen, is that readers actually most appreciate when publishers make that signage and that delineation between editorial and brand clear, and then they can go on knowing how that sort of relationship between advertiser and publisher sort of has been set up. So actually making that delineation very kind of obvious to readers increases trust. So I hope that sort of answers that question. I'll hand over to Juhi if she's also got some input there.
Actually, that was exactly what I was going to say. And actually, Sumati, also addressing your question from earlier around SEO, we were doing some research actually around that because, you know, we talked about this before. And one of the things that is literally out there as a point of view is that there is an inherent trust that gets transferred to brands when they align with publications. And as publishers, obviously, we're not selling anything. So from an SEO perspective, what you're getting is the halo effect of the trust and the credibility. Gaurav, to your question around how do you really work well together, it's something we've talked about. And it is when publishers are allowed to do what they do best. So it does require brands to be a little bit brave, with full respect, and having come from a hardcore brand background, I know the sophistication, but it is allowing the publisher to bring their personality and use that to create a brand story. That's really where the trust and the integration really, really happens. And, you know, we've seen that in research with our readers. There's a surprisingly high percentage of readers who said that they've actually chosen a brand or a product because they have seen it advertised on Coconuts, and by which I mean there is a story about it. So it literally shifts the needle, but it works the best when there is a little bit of bravery on both parts, where that synergy is around each brand, both publisher and other brand, being true to who they are, versus us trying to be an agency. And this is what we're not trying to be. We're not trying to be a creative agency and create a TVC. We're trying to create content that resonates with our readers who you're trying to reach.
Yeah, I think there's a very interesting learning there for some of the younger publishers in the region as well. SOPA has quite a few members that are, you know, were sort of born in the 20-teens and are not, you know, 100+ years old like some of our brands, and even Coconuts now is becoming one of the senior leaders hitting your double digits. And but I think a lot of the younger publishers are challenged, trying to see which way should they be going. You know, I feel like it's clear that establishing trust in editorial, trust and transparency, and working with brands and agencies from that platform is a healthier way to go than taking what could be perceived as sometimes the easier route of mixing the editorial and the branded or advertising side of things. And I for one certainly hope that the industry can hew to that principle. Yeah. So maybe we can move on to the fourth section. We do have a question I'll get to from Matt Eaton about, that'll go to Sumati about performance metrics. I'll read the whole question out later, but let's do this section on social media. Because, you know, it's been an interesting time. Asia is a fertile ground for social media. You know, different countries have different top social media, and you have a number of really almost entirely new social media networks like Clubhouse coming to the fore. You have the big giants, you have messaging apps on kind of in between there. You've got niche community social media. What is, so I guess I'd put this out to all the panelists, what's working right now? And do you think that's going to keep working, or what do you think is going to be working in the near future, given how fast this landscape can shift, right? So perhaps we can start with Gaurav and then go on from there.
I mean, I can tell you about the challenges of social media, which are many, right? And then I can talk about what's working. I mean, I think every brand, every company has been through its learning curve with social media. As social media themselves have been through their learning curve with brands and their monetization. I mean, a lot of the social media companies you talk to, every year they'll give you new principles on how to succeed on their platform, and they will never be the same as they were the year before, right? And I think the biggest, I would say the biggest 2 or 3 learnings that we've had is, initially it was about let's be authentic, let's be genuine, and let's not put in too much of your brand. Now it's all become about ensure that you start your first 2 seconds with brand, and now it's gone back into how do you stay authentic, right? So there's been a bit of a pendulum shift. I just feel that the big social media platform that all of us are exploring and looking at very closely is TikTok. And I think the reason why we are is because there is no brand has fully cracked how to succeed on TikTok. And I think it's quite telling of the time, is because TikTok is all about it's all about the consumer, right? It's not about the product, it's not about the brand, it's all about the consumer. And I feel that there needs to be a very natural connect of how you can integrate your brand into the life of the consumer and ensure that you're enabling creating simple formats for them to tell stories about your brand. So I think TikTok is at its best when it is a simple framework. I mean, I remember back in the TV days where I used to look at every brand used to have its 15-second advertising format. You start with a provocation, talk about your tension, then get into a brand product, and then get into some kind of a celebration. I think TikTok has, I would say, mastered a 15-second format in a really modern world. And I think, brands know 15-second formats better than anyone else. I think the question is, what is our customer engagement content with the brand, and how do we seed really entertaining content that enables and encourages consumers to share stories like those?
Thanks, Gaurav. Yeah, good to lead off that discussion. TikTok has certainly been one that's exploded on the scene, and people have been challenged to deal with. Who would like to go next to talk social media, perhaps with a different perspective?
I actually had more of a question point to this, because I know Gaurav, and Gaurav, this is maybe for you, because when you talked about the fact that Clubhouse is something that, Barrett talked about Clubhouse as a growing channel. And then I'm just going back to what you just talked about Gen Z earlier on, about the fact that they are not that comfortable sharing, and Clubhouse is kind of a completely different social media. So are you then seeing things moving in a direction, or the social platforms adapting to this new generation that's coming through? I'm really intrigued, because this is, I've just put the two things together as you've been talking about them and trying to see where do you see them headed?
So, I mean, I just feel that, we used to talk a lot about user-generated content, right? And we spoke about campaigns going viral and then inviting user-generated content. I feel with Gen Z is they share content, but in a very small group, because they don't want to put themselves out there like Gen Y did. So I think the only way to kind of interact and engage with them is to make it super easy and super fun for them to get involved. And I mean, without trivializing your product or brand. So I feel it's really about giving them a simple kind of framework to share their brand experiences within. And I think it's what's the simplest customer expression or ritual of your brand that can be brought to life in a social context. And I think that will enable people to share more, talk more about it, without truly putting themselves out there, because there is safety in numbers with TikTok. Is, everyone's doing it, so I can do it, versus I want to stand out and I want to have my amazing picture out there. So it's more about that concept which I feel might be working with that audience.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Julia, perhaps I could turn to you for the B2B side. Is this a love-love relationship, a love-hate relationship, a hate-hate relationship? Where are you guys at with your social media journey?
I think social media for us has always been a powerful mechanism for audience development and discovery of content. So there are teams within our newsroom and also within our agency, The Trust, who are focused on finding audiences where they are and serving them or promoting content to them in that environment. And so if audiences that we're trying to reach are really engaging heavily in Facebook or on Twitter or on LinkedIn, we may want to find them there to promote and introduce our content to them, but with the ultimate goal that they come back to our website. Research shows that people who have a strong relationship with a news brand, so people who go to that website, for example, WSJ.com, have a higher propensity to subscribe or to pay for that content than people who don't really experience that content on the brand's website. So for us, it is really important that eventually they come back to our site, and that's our ultimate objective, is to bring them down sort of into a very thought out experience that generates higher engagement with our platforms. For the commercial side of the business, so for my team, when we think about social media, it's very similar. We're using social media to expose or to promote branded content to new audiences. However, I would say that we're focusing a lot more on that discovery being across our ecosystem. So the Wall Street Journal is a part of a portfolio of other brands underneath Dow Jones. So we have Barron's magazine, Market Watch, Penta magazine, WSJ magazine, a luxury magazine, and we're wanting to increase the reach and scale of that ecosystem to enable discovery within it, so that content can be consumed within our ecosystem as opposed to on third-party platforms.
Yeah, reach and discovery, bringing on new readers. I'm hearing a lot of the similar ways that we're thinking about this as well. Juhi, Coconut is across Asia. You have reporters and editors based in basically almost every major capital city, I think. Social media usage different across each of these countries. What's caught your attention? What's working for you right now?
So we're actually just really about bringing it back to the basics. And so while we use social media, I think we use it very much, I think like Julia said, for as a bit of discovery, as a bit of getting people, it's a bit of a preview versus our entire experience. And so when I think about where we're investing literally cold hard cash, it is entirely on our website and on our platforms, because that is where we can give a full, true, and I keep saying brand experience. And we see this being mirrored across, even brands. Like, look at the rise of direct-to-consumer e-commerce, right? There is a much richer brand experience that you can provide on an e-commerce platform that you completely own than you can on an Amazon or a Lazada or a Shopee. There is a credibility, there is an immersive experience. So that's what we're also doing. We need social media, it's a double-edged sword, but I think we do believe it is in some ways quite deliberately obtuse. It's very hard to fully crack. I don't think they really want you to crack it, they being the overlords. So we aren't spending a huge amount of time in trying to fully crack it and invest all our time. We're using it as a way to develop our audience. We're using it as a way to kind of give people a preview into the experiences and stories that we have. But we're really, really investing in building our platforms. And I think, to Julia's point, we acquired 2 other publications last year. So really kind of building, and it's our first time really building an ecosystem now as a media group versus as a media publication. And we think this is best done on our own platforms.
I feel like the next Media Insiders, we need to have one of the overlords to be allowed to reply and say if they're purposely subverting all of us, or if this is an accidental result of the complexity of their operations.
I think they would say they're out innovating us.
Yes.
We will see. I mean, we do have at SOPA linkages with the various social media groups, so perhaps that's exactly what needs to happen next on the next Media Insiders. Although I'm not sure I would volunteer to moderate that one. Well, good. Okay. I would like to address some of the questions that have come up, and it sounds like we have a question here for someone who's building a proposal, I think, right now. And it goes to Sumati directly, but actually what I've heard from Julia and Juhi in particular, it sounds like you yourselves are also, you're building your own brands, right? You're building the brands and you're looking at metrics and you're looking at audience engagement yourself. So in a sense, you're also acting as marketers and as assessors. So the question is, what metrics are most important to brands today? What deeper insights do you want to see outside of audience engagement, time on site, monthly unique viewers, and page views? Those being the sort of the four standard ones, right? Have the type of metrics changed as advertisers move from display ads to content, live events, and social media? I mean, I think to some degree the answer is yes, but the question then is how have they changed, right? So Sumati, do you want to take a first crack at that?
Yeah, I can. I think those metrics don't go away, but I think what has started happening a lot more are internal conversations in the business saying, what do those metrics really mean? Or what do they ladder up to? And so how do they ladder up to our business metrics, for example? So for us, like those metrics only make sense if more and more consumers are raising their hand and opting in to hear from us directly, or staying with us longer and coming back longer. Without that relationship, I could have a number of people coming in to read my content, but hey ho, so what? So it's the so what and why am I looking at this is becoming more and more is becoming more and more challenging for us. It doesn't mean that we will stop looking at page views, etc., because that is our first kind of reflection on, are we succeeding? Are we actually getting the people in? But it's what do people do once they come there? I think that's what we're looking at. And that's, again, just looking at the website. But for us, then metrics also mean, CRM engagements, e-commerce engagements, how well are we doing on search within those platforms? Do you mention direct to commerce? For us, we look at, and I know it's something that Gaurav again mentioned, but we haven't really picked up, it is the cross-platform engagement. We are no longer looking at an isolated platform engagement. We want to be able to know how our consumer is kind of engaging with us across all platforms, and can we follow that consumer? And do we know who this person is? I think that's where I think all businesses ultimately, and I think including publishers, want to get to, is who is this person who's coming and reading me, and how much can I know about this? Right,
that total customer view.
Yeah.
I want to give Juhi and Julia a chance to come in on that as well, but also I actually have a follow-up question on that, which is, are you, as an advertiser, are you worried about this cookieless future? I mean, are you going to be able to construct that total customer view? Is that view going to be degraded in the very near future? And how are you looking to publishers, if you are, to help fill in those holes?
I think, yes, of course, Barrett, we're quite aware of the fact that we need to address that future that stands almost right next to us. And we are working towards understanding how do we, build, which is why we need consumers to opt in to hear from us, right? And the closer that we can get to that, the better it is from us. I think from publishers, definitely, especially Julia, moving from traditional print to digital, they have done that. They've taken audiences that have opted to go into subscription models, sign up to receive, and continue to stay engaged with the brand when free content is not available. They're willing to give their data to get what they need. And I think that's something, understanding that engagement that comes, for us, like content is only one part of the value proposition that we could ever give our consumers. There is a lot more that we can. So it's understanding that, and it's also the in-platform engagement, the continued keeping them in and keeping them engaged. And I think there's a lot that we can learn from the publishers.
Okay, thank you. Julia?
Yeah, I think that Sumati's point on this is really resonating with me, which is to find out what you're trying to measure. What is your end goal? So if we think about the Wall Street Journal as a brand that is trying to attract people to subscribe or to become members, that's the ultimate goal. And so we're looking for the behaviors which we have seen are a precursor or show a propensity to do that. And some of the behaviors which we've seen as being quite clearly indicating someone's looking to subscribe are that they spend a certain number of days on our website per month. So we're tracking how many, what we call active days, are they on our website every month. And we have certain thresholds which we can sort of see as being successful or sort of not successful in terms of leading to that. Other things that we're tracking are, once somebody lands on our site, what do they do from that point? Do they then click through to another article? And if so, how many clicks deep do they go? We also want to see sort of what those actions are beyond that first article read. So are they clicking on to follow one of our authors, etc. The reason that we're tracking all of these things is because we do know the behaviors which lead to a subscribe. And so we're very interested in certain metrics which give us a good sign as to whether we're going to be increasing subscriptions through that behavior.
Right. Juhi, are you tracking if people are following your authors and how many pages deep they're going onto the Coconut site, which you said you're investing all of your capital in?
Yeah, I mean, I think for us, there is the quantitative aspect, which is, you know, a big part of, actually it's a big part of my discussions with Byron very often. But I think what we found particularly interesting is the depth of knowledge that we're getting. It's that so what? It's that real deep understanding of our audiences. And that's where we're really investing. We're investing doing a lot of audience work, a lot of audience survey work, a big understanding of how are they perceiving our stories, our tone of voice, the brands we work with. Because that is, as a publisher, that is not yet, you know, we're not the Wall Street Journal, but as Coconuts, we have a niche. That's where we want to build a depth. We want to build a really, really deep audience understanding that can answer the so what. So that's really where we're investing. And that's really what we're trying to take very actively to brands.
Maybe I'll turn to Gaurav as well. Is there anything else that you haven't heard here that in terms of the metrics and how they're changing the 2020s that you think need to be watched?
Yeah, I think as there are more data points to track, clients are starting to create their data lakes. And I think the complexity within the world of data is extremely high. And I think Sumati articulated, I think it's really about the so what, where we're looking at now some really aggregating the multiple different streams of data into some macro data kind of, patterns. And, we used to call it like things like brand trust. Now, is it about customer engagement? Is it lifetime value? So really looking at the multiple different streams of data that we are bringing in, but really bringing that together to create some macro scores to be able to track the performance of the business. And I think the C-suite is really not interested in like the deep like page view and how long people have visited a page. They want to know, okay, so how are we doing this month? And you need to give them some really big macro trends which are going to make them make complete business decisions. And I feel that's where data is going. I think the other big piece is to ensure that there's enough first-party data, as Sumati says as well. We need to be able to, brands need to be able to have that direct relationship with the audience to be able to collect the data and then reach them directly. So cookie-less or with cookies, right? It then doesn't matter because you have that direct one-on-one engagement with the audience.
Right. I feel like what you're saying is we're coming right back to Sumati's data discipline and making sure that discipline is what the C-suite are expecting in many ways. So we're just about at time. I think this has been a great conversation. I want to thank everyone very much for joining us. And I want to also highlight that SOPA, I'm sure many of you who are listening have entered the SOPA Awards, or your organizations have, and are eagerly awaiting when the SOPA Awards finalists will be announced. We're aiming for that to be done in May. And we're aiming for the SOPA Awards to actually be given out in June, and stay tuned in that space. And we're looking at how coronavirus restrictions are shifting and what we might be able to do live, where we could actually see each other again in person, or virtual as we did last year. And we're all sort of fingers crossed, hoping we can at least clink glasses, even if in a socially distanced way. So more to come on that. But this has been a great beginning to the 2021 Media Insiders series. Thank you very much, Julia, Juhi, Sumati, and Gaurav. Wonderful conversation. And we'll let you go here and enjoy the rest of your day.
Thank you, Barrett. Really great session.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.